Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. During the question and answer session, please press star one on your touch-tone phone. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I will now turn the meeting over to Mr. Jared Liu. Thank you. You may begin.
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. This is the Brown Bag Lunch Series, a monthly webcast held at the lunch hour. The trainings leverage local successes by amplifying to a larger audience two model organizations' methods, materials, and approaches. Sessions are planned to last no more than 1 hour with two presenters speaking on the same topic from slightly different perspectives, each for about 10 to 15 minutes, followed by 10 to 15 minutes of questions and answers. Today's session is approved by the ISA for 1 CEU hour and from SAF for 1 Category 1 CFE. So if anyone would like credit for those and you haven't already given me your number, please make sure to email me afterwards. Alternatively, most state landscape and architecture boards have confirmed that all they need is a certificate of completion if you want credit for from those boards as well, which I can provide to you if you email me after as well. So this is a program of the Alliance for Community Trees, and I want to encourage everyone to join if you're not already a member. Also want to thank our sponsors, the Home Depot Foundation and the USDA Forest Service, for making these sessions possible. Today's session is Trees and Transportation. Trees and landscape features that are located within the public right-of-way and adjacent to roadways in urban environments are often perceived by transportation officials as a safety risk. Tree plantings may be limited or prohibited by public works or transportation professionals due to concerns, but there are many community benefits that result from having roadside landscapes. Armed with that information, advocates of urban forestry are encouraging roadside plantings that balance transportation mobility, accessibility needs, public welfare, and community livability. Today's first speaker is Pamela Helfer, who is the Program Manager Field Coordinator at Trees Forever, where she's been managing Iowa's Living Roadways Community Visioning Program for 5 years and recently assumed management of the ILR Projects Program as well. She has a bachelor's degree in environmental studies from Central College, served in the AmeriCorps National Civilian Community Corps, and worked as a naturalist and community organizer in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, prior to joining Trees Forever staff in 2000. Pamela works with Trees Forever's programs and volunteers in Central Iowa from her Ames office. Pamela, it's all yours.
Thank you, Jared. It's good to be here today talking about trees and transportation. Just a little bit first about Trees Forever. We are a nonprofit organization founded in 1989, so we are just kicking off celebrations for our 20th year coming up. We have a staff of about 18 people, focused mostly in Iowa, but also in Illinois, with our headquarters in Marion. And our mission is to plant and care for trees in the environment by empowering people, building community, and promoting stewardship. The Iowa's Living Roadways programs is the umbrella program I'll be talking about this afternoon. The Community Visioning and Projects programs are the two primary ones in that family, in which we encourage communities to plant trees and other native plants along the roadsides of their transportation corridors. It's a multi-partner effort that's been going since 1996. And we do focus on Iowa's smaller communities and focus on their transportation corridors. Our partners and sponsors in the program are the Iowa Department of Transportation and the Living Roadway Trust Fund and the Federal Highway Administration. For program delivery, Trees Forever provides the facilitators. Iowa State University Landscape Architecture Extension developed and manages the program and provide student interns. Private sector landscape architects also participate in the design phase of visioning, and the communities provide input in their planning processes. In this partner list, we do have a steering committee that helps guide and direct the program. They meet twice a year, and actually are meeting right now as I speak, so I'm skipping out on them briefly. And I will talk more about them in a little bit as a group, but they are a very valuable part of our program. The DOT here in Iowa places a high value on collaboration and planning, and so because of that, we found that it's not always a highly replicable program due to the multi-agency partnership and competitive nature of the private sector. In Iowa, of our 949 communities, most of those have fewer than 10,000 residents, and that is the demographic we're trying to hit with these programs. The community must have fewer than 10,000 people to participate, and nearly 800 of those have fewer than 2,000 people. And those communities we see do not have the same resources on staff as larger towns, and so they are able to take advantage of this package of design services that we offer to create a positive impact in their town. The goals of the ILR programs, and ILR is our acronym for Iowa's Living Roadways. We assist the small communities with transportation corridor enhancements. We provide funding for their plant materials. We focus on incremental projects to enhance their environment and quality of life. We create ecologically and economically sustainable transportation elements. We work to empower the volunteers and leaders in the communities, link the projects with community and regional resources to be sure that they are successful in implementation. And we emphasize the need for competent design assistance. The maps on this page, I apologize, are a little out of date, but my overall numbers are current. Since 1996, 151 Iowa communities have participated in the visioning program, and over 300 projects have been installed around the state. Taking the program from a vision to completed projects begins with the Iowa Department of Transportation. They do provide the funding for the planning part of this program and actually helped make the original connection for us with the other partners. The design concept is supported by ISU Extension Landscape Architecture and was actually created there by a staff member, Julia Badenhope. And when she was piloting the program in 95-96, she could only herself do this in 2 to 3 communities herself due to limited time and resources. Trees Forever provides facilitation support for the communities when we go in to do this process, and we do work with 12 communities each year to do this. Those communities participating this year are midway through the process, which runs from approximately April through October. And the DOT saw that need that Julia had for additional facilitation help and connected her with Trees Forever, since we have field staff throughout the state on the ground working at the grassroots level with those communities. When we do go in to work with the community in the visioning program, we work with committees to make sure that they are successful by incorporating many different elements and representatives of the community and trying to build that core group, because then those folks who are on the actual committee are responsible for pulling in additional feedback and input from the community as a whole at certain points throughout the process. So the committee is guiding the vision for the community and making sure that everyone has a chance to be heard. When we begin the meetings, the Trees Forever facilitator introduces the program, the partners, and the process, and the committee members need to express what their hopes and dreams are for meeting the needs of their community. Following that, we do a pretty extensive community resource assessment where the committee goes out, has to do some homework, learning more about their community, and they're always surprised that they dig up information they didn't know about their town, even folks who are lifelong residents. They look at their natural resources, the bioregion of the community, how the people are interacting with the environment and how that affects their life and their community, the cultural and historical resources, and the visual quality of their community along the transportation corridors. A major feature that we have incorporated in this as well is a transportation assessment and an online survey. Transportation meeting serves to bring together this group of people listed on the right that may not otherwise have met previously or sometimes actually have negative impressions of working with each other. And we make a positive connection with those folks in the planning process so that when they get to the point of doing project implementation, we're trying to demystify the permit process and make sure that they have open lines of communication. We often have folks, everyone from the chief landscape architect at the Iowa Department of Transportation on down through the local maintenance manager at the DOT district shop participating in this meeting. The online survey is a piece then that also serves to bring in input from the larger community where people are asked to map their personal walking, biking, and driving routes, which factors into the goal setting for this process. The committee uses all that information from the transportation meeting and the other assessments to decide which areas of their transportation corridors in their community they would like to focus on. There's often more than we can accomplish in the process, so they're asked to look at 3 to 4 areas. And that leads them into a charrette, or a day-long design workshop, where the committee and the design team work to develop their concepts, and the public is invited to participate in that, see what's coming out of that process, and give their comments on, I think that bench looks great there, or gosh, why don't you try something other than trees in this location, or native prairie plants. We really want to find out what the community wants for their town, because it is their community, not somebody just telling them how it should look. Some of the things they would see during that day are image edits of the locations. This one is from Sheldon, Iowa. It's a pocket park that they identified. Had formerly been a church lot. The church had been torn down. The lot belongs to the city. And they wanted to make sure it had something there besides just open space. And this image edit shows what the designers came up with based on suggestions from the community. We also work with them to understand that this is just a concept design. They can't necessarily take this picture and go straight to putting plants in the ground, because we don't try to identify species or exact location at this point, but rather just showing what it could look like when they're finished with the project installation. The products that they receive to help them are a series of conceptual display boards, feasibility study, which gives them suggested phased implementation and cost estimates, and their field coordinator works with them on implementation strategies. Here you'll see an example of the Sheldon concept board for that church lot. Image edit shows a little bit about also how they came up with the theme for that arch. It was an old original welcome arch to the community. We try to tie in historical pieces as they see fit. Another concept board from a community showing overall the sites that they chose along their corridors to focus on enhancement projects, marked in red. This community, as was the case with many of them when we started this program, was being bypassed by the state highway, which was one of the main factors that got the DOT interested in helping these communities with design assistance, because when you take the highway from the center of town, bypass it around the edges, it creates a lot of changes in the community, socially, economically, and visually. The committee is responsible for doing a public presentation of their concepts, sharing that with everybody in the community so that people can get on board with it. And then they work on implementation planning with their field coordinator from Trees Forever, reviewing their feasibility report, prioritizing projects, and coming up with strategies for implementing those projects. We have a lot of resources to use with the communities. We annually update a community project funding guide published in-house at Trees Forever. This is available, a copy of it, on our website or by request from me after the conference today. As well, we have published a series of implementation guides that address common topics we have seen many communities have questions about or may encounter hurdles with as they're implementing projects. So we try to help them with how to write a grant, coordinating volunteers in their community for the projects, working with them on why they should plant native plants, finding and selecting their native plant materials, because that isn't always necessarily available as easily at the neighborhood nursery, involving the community in the planning, hiring a landscape architect, because we do emphasize that they use professional design assistance to maintain the longevity and quality of their projects, and making sure that they are doing well-designed community signs, again, to have long-term impact in their community. Taking that vision of theirs then to the completed project phase, the Federal Highway Administration and Living Roadway Trust Fund of Iowa help fund projects through our projects program at Trees Forever. And all these partners really help with our logistical thinking, strategic thinking in the program. Without them, we might not be able to get as many community projects completed because, for example, the partners help us keep track of the federal transportation bill, what the new and hot topics are coming with that, such as walkable communities and senior mobility. As well, our Department of Transportation has just been fantastic in helping us learn a whole new terminology that we at Trees Forever need to get projects completed. For example, I would call something landscape planning and design. However, when we're writing grants to get the funding for projects, we need to make sure that we're calling that work, it should actually be called pre-engineering to get through the DOT channels appropriately. Another example of that is something that I would call an art installation along the roadside. They need to make sure that it's called an enhancement so that we don't scare the engineering sector of the DOT. We just need to know the right terminology to make sure that things can happen. So the projects program also is for communities under 10,000 in population, and they can request grants of up to $15,000, and they can come back to that program more than once as needed. It's to purchase native plant materials, and they are required to provide a 30% match of cash or in-kind contributions. This example from a community shows then taking from the concept design to a detailed design. How much additional work they really do need to do with a design professional to be able to install a project. You can't just take one of the pretty concept designs and plant it. There's a lot to think about. And then, again, going back to our partners at the local DOT offices to make sure that we are allowing for appropriate clear zones and setbacks, safety allowances, those kinds of things. And without the proper channels of communication set up, it would be more difficult to do that. But we try to get the communities set up for success in that. And then just a few pictures of projects that have been completed. In Fredericksburg, that's a picture of a trail. It looks like a rails to trail with trees along the side. Boulevard planting in Waverly, Iowa of trees and shrubs. We use our native Iowa prairie plants as much as possible as well when the site allows it. Roadsides there in Williamsburg and North Liberty, also with trees planted along the right-of-way. And a couple of more roadside projects that are just beautiful. And if you are close enough or you happen to be traveling through Iowa right now here in July and August, you're hitting the height of the prairie bloom season. So there's definitely something to see besides corn when you're driving through Iowa. And I hope you'll be able to visit us either to see the prairie plants or to attend our celebration of these programs on November 14th.
Fantastic. Thank you, Pam.
Thank you.
If the operator can open the lines for questions, please.
Okay. Thank you. We will now begin the question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question, please press star 1. Please unmute your phone and record your name clearly when prompted. Your name is required to introduce your question. To withdraw your request, press star 2. One moment for the first question.
And attendees have the option of asking a question through the phone, or if you want to be anonymous, you can type it into the question manager online, and I'll come on and read it for you. And I do want to start with a question. It seems like y'all place such a strong emphasis on the vision, truly coming from within the community and making sure you get all of the right people from a very diverse and broad section of the community involved early on and throughout the process. It sounds like you must have an example where that didn't happen, and sort of a lesson learned. Why do you focus so strongly on making sure that you get that contingency in the room?
We definitely make sure that we have that contingency because it contributes to the long-term success of projects. If we can get people involved and on the bus with the program early on when the community is in the planning stages, it makes the project implementation go much more smoothly. The education process is more smooth too than when you're installing a prairie project. People may think it looks weedy the first few years, but if they've been in on the planning, they're more understanding and just keeps things rolling along from one project to the next successfully.
Okay. And now most of the groups that we work with are considerably smaller than Trees Forever. And I noticed that you worked with about 10 to 12 communities a year. Mm-hmm. And I guess I'm wondering, how much staff time does that take? How many staff at Trees Forever work on that? If we're trying to get into the shoes of the smaller nonprofit tree organization and getting a mind around whether this is something they can do, how much time might it take them to work per community?
Per community. Just the time for a Trees Forever facilitator to work with a community. We have 8 people in the field who work with these communities. So any individual may have 1 to 3 towns they're working with right now. And I forget the actual hours that I have budgeted in the program per community, but it is significant because each of the 10 meetings takes 2 hours just for the meeting, and that doesn't include the prep time, the travel time, meeting minutes afterwards, communication with the partners, and then I also, as the manager, put in a significant amount of time making sure that everything is flowing well in the communities, helping troubleshoot if there are facilitation questions or difficulties or people needing help with tips and tricks for facilitating meetings. So it is significant, and if anybody is interested in the actual hours I have budgeted, I can look that up and respond to emails later.
Okay. Let me turn it over to some questions online. Are planted transportation corridors considered part of a larger plan to connect parks or other natural areas? What is the involvement with city or county planning departments?
Absolutely, they are. That's often a goal that comes out in a community to think about how they can connect parks, schools, trails, and make those safe and beautiful pedestrian or recreational accesses around the community. We do require that any community participating in visioning a project has local government partners sign off on the project so that we know there is involvement. And as part of that planning process, we make sure that we have all the stakeholders affected by projects involved.
Okay. Are the funds used by the DOT from the FHA provided to all states? What FHA program is this?
That, I'm not sure if it's provided to all states. I'm sorry, I can't answer that.
Okay. As I may have missed this, are these projects primarily along state and federal highways or also roadways of local importance?
Both. A lot of them are along the state and federal highways in the state. There's a lot of mileage out there in Iowa to get from one place to another. We're obviously a lot more spread out than some places. We actually, in our state, the Department of Transportation in the right-of-way owns a much greater acreage than our public park system for the state, so there's a lot of potential there. And there are also projects along local roadways of importance, major transportation corridors within communities, and that includes trails.
What becomes, or who becomes responsible for maintenance? Are there problems with invasive species?
There are sometimes problems with invasive species, and who is involved in maintenance varies depending on the project. We make sure that's a part of the planning for anything. Definitely needs to be addressed ahead of time. You don't want to put something in and then after it's planted go and announce to somebody in the county roadside department that they are responsible for this. That's perfect recipe for getting it mowed down. So we make sure to involve people who are responsible for maintenance in the upfront planning phase. Okay.
Does the operator have any questions?
I am showing no questions at this time.
Okay. I'm curious to hear more about the DOT officials, because did I hear at some point you all had a board member who was on the DOT, and that might have helped facilitate things?
We have in the past, yes. And the DOT has been a fantastic partner when we had a board member involved on our Trees Forever board, and they continue to be one of the best partners that we work with. We just have a fantastic relationship with them. Like I said, they really value the collaboration and planning aspect of the programs and what we can do to assist the communities with their transportation corridor enhancements. So I just have to hand it to our DOT.
Okay. Would you say that this program is doable for groups that don't have field staff set up the same way that Trees Forever does?
For instance, if a community wanted to just do this on their own, I suppose it could be doable. It just depends on who you have in your community. If there's somebody, an economic development person or within the city who is really interested in being a facilitator and pulling together the planning process to make sure that all the necessary phases are hit. Nothing is skipped while you're doing the planning, because without that, it really sets up the projects for successful implementation.
Okay.
I think it would be much more difficult without somebody who typically facilitates the program.
All right. Well, fantastic. And we do have more information posted about this this program on our website too, and I'll provide the link to everyone that after as well. We do maintain a series of case studies, and we think this is a fantastic one. So thanks, Pam. And if others have more questions, you can hold them till after the second presentation. So now I'll turn it over to Dorothy McDaniel, who is the Executive Director of Trees Columbus in Georgia. Prior to working for Trees Columbus, Dorothy was Project Manager of Georgia Conservancy's Blueprints for Successful Communities, a program that won national acclaim for helping Georgia grow without sacrificing its environment. Before moving to Columbus, Dorothy managed the Advanced Planning Division of the Baton Rouge City Parish Consolidated Government Planning Commission. There she managed land use, comprehensive and historic preservation planning, and city parish brownfields and wetlands program. She graduated from the University of Virginia and earned a master's from the School of Environmental Design at the University of Georgia. A native of Atlanta, Dorothy and her husband Matthew moved to Columbus in 2004. Thanks for joining us today, Dorothy.
Thank you, Jared. And I have to start off by saying that Pam's PowerPoint is going to shame me. It's far less beautiful, functional perhaps, but not as beautiful. I don't have so many pretty pictures, so bear with me. But I'm going to start off by saying that I wish that we had a program like ILR. It's such an effective model, and it's true that when you're trying to take on these types of projects on your own, there are a lot of lessons learned, and it's tougher. And Pam is exactly right that you need to have local people who are able to facilitate and really be champions of the effort and make those connections. So what I'm going to focus on today is building relationships. In our case, we call it building relationships to build community-friendly roadways. And first, a little bit about Trees Columbus. We are a nonprofit organization. We're a member organization in Columbus. We were founded in 2001, so we're fairly young. The mission is to plant, preserve, and protect trees, and we do that specifically in Columbus, Muskogee County. Our efforts do filter out a bit to some of the surrounding counties, but we focus on Columbus, Muskogee. We have about 2,000 members and supporters, which is great. We grew very fast, and that's always a good sign. That means that you've really made a connection with the community. We have 2 part-time staff people, and our programs focus on tree planting, education, and advocacy. Columbus itself is about 2 hours south of Atlanta. We're right on the Chattahoochee River. Interstate 185 dead ends at Columbus, and that's going to figure into the conversation a little later. A lot of people know us as the home to Fort Benning. We're also the home to some major corporations like Aflac, TSIS, Synovus, and that has helped create a history here of public and private partnerships to get things done and help to create a legacy of investment in public trees. And I was fortunate to inherit that legacy in 2007. I've only worked for Trees Columbus for a little over a year. But I did inherit that great investment in trees, and I inherited a network of relationships that center around public trees. And that's going to be what I'm going to focus on today. As I said, forgive me that I don't have all the pretty pictures, but we should be pretty efficient. I can't necessarily claim a role in forming this network of relationships because I've only been around for a year. But I do want to talk a little bit about how that network of support and communication has been so valuable when we're talking about trees and transportation corridors. First and most importantly, here in Columbus, we've got champions for public trees and for right-of-way trees in particular. There are people in this town who are willing to invest time and energy and resources into right-of-way trees. And those champions took the right first steps. They conducted community surveys. They used education and awareness to really cultivate grassroots support for public trees. And once you have that grassroots support, then we can start working on things like infrastructure for planting trees, for maintaining trees, and for protecting those trees. That's done through local planning and local ordinances, coordinated with the city and coordinated with the Department of Transportation. We are fortunate also here in Columbus that one of our State Department of Transportation board members lives here. He's very involved with the community. He's a master gardener. He has a particular interest in trees. And with his help, the City of Columbus and local partners like us at Trees Columbus and Keep Columbus Beautiful and Columbus Gateways, I'll talk about them, we're able to communicate efficiently with DOT engineers, with the planners. We know who to talk to, and that's always helpful. I'm no expert as far as engineering or design or species selection or maintenance, but we have a good system of communication. We have experts in the city, urban forestry and beautification division that handle that. The most important thing is we have this network and we're all communicating. And that last bullet on the PowerPoint is just to point out that you want to be sure to leverage your successes because years of hard work go into these projects when you're talking about transportation corridors. There are a lot of layers of things you need to do. And it's important that we can always give credit where credit is due and really celebrate your victories because it's hard work. And as Pam pointed out, there are a lot of specific steps to be followed. So I'm going to talk about a few projects in particular. And I'm going to start locally with a street tree master plan and why that was a good foundation. I'll talk a little bit about a specific transportation enhancement project, a good high-profile T project. I'll go over a scenic byway designation and the significance of that, and then talk a little bit about Trees Columbus as an organization and how we support the trees and transportation issue through our education and advocacy programs. Again, the key to all of this has been establishing a network of communication, building partnerships, and again, I can't speak to how that got started because I wasn't involved with that, but I can tell you it requires constant and continued cultivation. So I'll get started talking about that street tree master plan. That is a great tool because it lays out our planting priorities for all of the major corridors in Columbus. It designates high priority areas that might be because they're major entryways, or it might be because the condition of the right-of-way is such that it's easy to plant trees. The plan also notes where infrastructure work needs to take place prior to planting. One of the best things about the street tree plan is that it's evidence of the fact that street tree planting and maintenance is just part of the daily business of local government in Columbus. It's part of what we do. The street tree plan also mentions a Columbus Gateways program, and this is something that's been around for decades. And the Columbus Gateways program is one of the things people notice first about this town. Gateways plants trees and other sort of landscape improvements along the entry corridors, or gateways, as they call them, into our city. It's a very popular program. They've done some fundraising in the schools, even with kids collecting change to buy trees and plant trees. But that is also included in the street tree master plan. And I know that most of y'all are familiar with transportation enhancement grants, but I'm going to talk specifically about a project we have going on here. One of our tree champions is a lifetime resident and had a vision to restore historic tree canopy along Veterans Parkway. It's one of the major entryways into Columbus. We have a historic downtown core that features oak line boulevards, and that's close to the river. As you work your way out, those oak line boulevards have deteriorated to a bit, and over time the Veterans Parkway corridor has lost the tree line boulevard and just become more of a typical 4-lane with a turn lane asphalt swath that skirts the downtown and takes you to the Civic Center. So about 4 years ago, our tree champion teamed up with another tree champion and decided that the time was right to restore that corridor in a really dramatic and high-profile way, and in a way that would be a showcase for corridor enhancement. I'm going to do this slide first because this is an important statement about the project. I know that most of the folks out there are going to be familiar with the Transportation Enhancement Grant Program, and the Veterans Parkway project will receive $3 million for construction for this Veterans Parkway enhancement. Trees Columbus, as an organization, is providing the matching funds for this project. This project was so important to our tree champions and to our organization that we pledged the matching funds in entirety. And this financial commitment, along with that established network of communication between us, between the city and our other local stakeholders, and between the Georgia DOT, really helped lay the groundwork for successfully funding this project and being successful with design and implementation. The transportation enhancement benefits are generally these. They're the selling points for the project. As with any transportation project, people are going to want to know what's going to be the impact on me. So really this project is going to emphasize the improvements in community appearance and in the image of the community. When people come down this corridor after completion and after planting, you're going to know you're someplace special. Safety will be improved by minimizing some of the curb cuts and touching on pedestrian access. It's going to be a safer place to be a pedestrian. And of course, property values for the businesses along this corridor tend to increase with this type of project. This next slide illustrates some of the main features of the Veterans Parkway project. In areas where that median is being restored, there was a lot of conversation with individual business owners to discuss their concerns about access and about visibility. We also had to work with the local sign ordinances. The bottom line in working through design for this project was to make sure we have the right people communicating with each other, making sure that we can make personal connections so that we know we're alleviating people's concerns, we're working with them in design, and really coming up with a project that is going to be not just the best for Trees Columbus, the best for the city of Columbus, but the best for everyone along this corridor and for the community in general. This is also an example. We worked with a consultant to help us through those pre-engineering steps Pam talked about. There's all sorts of very precise things you have to do with this type of project, so we brought in some experts to help us out. Along with access for this enhancement project, tree selection was another point of discussion. The design of the road, the speeds on this road are going to allow us to plant oak trees, metal oaks. But it took us a long time to figure that out in partnership with DOT. Because the city and our city arborist and other stakeholders in this project already had a good working relationship with the DOT, it made this part of the discussion much easier because there was already a level of communication. Everyone around the table knew that everybody knew what they were talking about. So that really helped us work through this conversation because safety is always an important issue. And when you're dealing with a Department of Transportation, it's of the utmost importance. So to have that good rapport enabled us to have a productive conversation about what kind of trees we could put along this corridor to have the maximum impact and still have a safe transportation corridor. There's one other thing I wanted to bring up real quick, and it doesn't necessarily relate to this image, but Pam showed some image edits of the pocket park where you can show a before and after image. Those are great tools, and they're very useful tools with this type of project. One thing to bear in mind with those is that once you flash that image up on the screen, people will not hear anything you're saying. They're just looking at that image. So make sure that image is what you want, and make sure it's as persuasive but also as realistic as it can be. But those are fantastic tools and very persuasive. I'm going to shift gears a bit and talk about advocacy related to right-of-way trees. We couldn't take the stands that we take for our trees if we hadn't laid groundwork through all that relationship building. Last year, the I-185 corridor, which is that sort of driveway into Columbus, it's that interstate I mentioned earlier, it was designated a Georgia Scenic Byway, and that designation came about as a result of 3 years of work by Keep Columbus Beautiful, local individuals, partner organizations like Trees Columbus, who all had a common interest in public trees. You see a quote on this slide that reads, "This is a very important event for our entire region. Not only will this designation preserve an already prestigious corridor, but it will forever prevent billboards and increase tourism." That quote was from our local DOT commissioner. He was instrumental in the designation process. And he recognizes and highlights the fact that that highway was essentially a driveway to Columbus. And Columbus has invested in the scenic quality of that highway for decades. Over the past few years, there have been some permits filed to cut trees along that corridor and other corridors in Columbus in order to view billboards. This scenic byway designation provides some protection for those trees along the corridor by limiting the billboards within that designated area. In addition, that designation also aids in the environmental review process for maintenance projects and construction projects. That just means an extra level of consideration will be given to the trees along the corridor during environmental review. I'm flying through this, so I hope I haven't lost anybody yet. But in the last slide, I mentioned tree cutting for billboards. This issue has risen in importance for our community over the last couple of years. Columbus has a history of investing in roadside beautification and in roadside trees, and Trees Columbus, along with our local partners and some state partners, have been active in education and advocacy to promote the importance of those right-of-way trees and raise awareness. These roadside tree plantings have been a source of pride in Columbus for decades, and our local citizens have been quick to respond to any threats to those trees, which is encouraging. We primarily work on grassroots advocacy and awareness during the General Assembly. A couple of bills have been introduced that would make it easier to cut more trees in order to view billboards. We established partnerships with groups like the Georgia Conservation Voters, the Garden Club of Georgia, who was the instrumental, and other tree organizations around the state to develop a communication network to make sure we had the best possible information coming from the state capitol. We knew what was going on. With that information, we could then send email alerts. We could use local television and newspaper coverage to help us activate concerned citizens who were quick to let their elected officials know that they wanted more protection for public trees as opposed to less. And we're, of course, going to have to continue working with those partnerships in the future. Finally, and meanwhile, we're also working with the City of Columbus and with Columbus Gateways to clarify existing regulations regarding tree cutting, specifically for billboards. There's some debate over tree cutting under the existing Department of Transportation Policy Manual, and we joined our local partners in filing a lawsuit to clarify the existing regulations. It's always a last resort to do that, but sometimes it's necessary, and we would not have been in a position to take that type of stand if we didn't have that strong network of support for our public trees that really goes from the grassroots up. And I should point out that while we're involved in that litigation, we are working with Department of Transportation on an ongoing basis on our transportation enhancement grants. And again, because we had that relationship and that network of communication, we're able to do those two things at once. So that's a lot of information without the pretty pictures, but that's what I have for y'all today, and I'm ready for questions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dorothy.
Thank you.
If the operator can open the line for questions, please.
Okay, again, if you'd like to ask a question, please press *1 on your touch-tone phone and record your name.
And again, you can ask questions by phone or you can type online anonymously. And I do want to start on the last point. I know that the case is in court now, so there may be limited things you can say about it, but how did it come to the decision of suing whoever it is? I'm not sure, the billboard industry or developer, whoever it might be. How did it get to that point, and how did you make that decision that that was the course of action to take?
That decision came about after, it was almost 2 years. It was at least a year and a half and almost 2 years of discussion between the DOT and outdoor advertising and our local stakeholders in the city of Columbus. And it came about because, as I said, there was debate over the interpretation of the DOT policy manual. So what the lawsuit really does is, rather than pointing the finger directly at DOT or pointing the finger directly at outdoor advertising, the lawsuit is saying we need clarification on whether or not our trees are protected from cutting. That was the decision that we arrived at. We were still having communication up to that point. But the decision was made that we needed the courts to help us determine under the existing law, are our trees protected from cutting or are they not?
And I imagine there was a process where that was somewhere down the line and there were other things that you thought, we'll try these first and those didn't work out?
Yes.
Okay. I'm asking because, I think this is a new realm for most of the tree groups that, at least that I work with. I don't know too many of them who work through the legal system like this.
Right.
So did Trees Columbus hire counsel, or is there a coalition that was able to find a pro bono lawyer? How did that all come about?
Well, it's a little of both. We did, in partnership with our coalition, with the City of Columbus and Columbus Gateways, hire an attorney. But we're also fortunate that Trees Columbus has quite a few attorneys on the board who feel very passionately about this issue. So it's been a combination of efforts. We have that interest within our own organization, but at the same time we have a coalition that's working on this issue locally.
And in this case, the City of Columbus is on your side.
Correct.
How would that change if they weren't?
Well, we should say we're on the City of Columbus's side. If that was not the case, it would be much, much more difficult.
Right.
And we've got decades of cooperation around planting these trees, maintaining them. So there's that long history involved. And if we didn't have that, we wouldn't be in the same position.
Okay. In general, dealing with transportation issues, who do you find are your main champions and who are your main detractors?
Locally we've got a growing network of champions, which it's a good thing to see. The detractors, rather than being people or organizations or things, tend to be a lack of awareness. The biggest things that we run into is that people don't know that steps can be taken to protect trees, or people don't know that steps can be taken to plant trees. I think awareness is one of the biggest things that we're working on. Safety is always paramount when you're talking about transportation issues. So awareness about the options that we have for creating safe roadways that are still a source of pride. I think that's probably been our biggest issue, and I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but That's really, it's not people or organizations that are popping into my head as being an obstacle. It's more of a lack of awareness.
Okay, yeah, and I was surprised as you were going through your presentation that it actually sounds like the traffic engineers and designers are actually on the same page, or there's not a whole lot of convincing that needs to happen on their end, where typically those are who we perceive to be the hurdles. And so there's a slew of research that will drop on their desk and try to convince them that actually trees can contribute to the safety of the roads and such.
And Jared, we are working in a community that is small enough that it's easier to establish personal relationships with people, so that even if you're walking into a room and you might not agree with the person across the table from you, they know that you know what you're talking about.
Okay.
And I think just having that level of respect helps a lot. And to know that as an organization that Trees Columbus knows what they're talking about, that the City of Columbus knows, so that level of sort of, I guess, personal accountability on our part, but to gain some level of respect is very helpful in this whole process.
Right. Okay. Does the operator have any questions?
I still show no questions at this time.
Okay. I'll ask about something policy related for either Dorothy and or Pam. We're active looking at our options for getting involved on the federal policy level on the transportation front, and I think it's no surprise to anyone that one of the big issues out there in general anyway is the price of gas. Mm-hmm. So getting into any discussion, it seems on the Hill, transportation related or not, comes back to the price of gas. And so one of the bills that we're looking at, seeing how we can influence right now, deals with congestion. And we have lots of studies on how trees can contribute to safety of the roads if they're correctly positioned, and how the economic development is enhanced and such. I don't see as much about congestion, and I'm wondering, I guess, have you seen anything? And practically, what have you seen too with these projects? Is congestion mitigated, not changed at all, etc.?
Pam, do you want me to start that one first?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. We are fortunate here that congestion in Columbus is not on the same scale as it is in places like Atlanta, Los Angeles, places like that. But everything's relative. And when you do a project like, say, the Veterans Parkway project, it took a bit of convincing to let some of our local stakeholders know that by completing this enhancement project and giving more, I guess, structure to that road, so people know where you can turn out, where you can't. They know where the curb cuts are. The left-hand turn lane is handled in a better and more logical situation. That will actually improve traffic flow. That's really the scale that we've dealt with the issue here. Of course, the solution to congestion for a long time has just been adding more lanes. And you hear the old curing obesity by loosening your belt quote over and over in that regard. But there has been some discussion about creating boulevards and what impacts that will have on congestion. That's about the extent of how we've dealt with it recently here in Columbus.
Okay. And anything in Iowa?
Well, I think we're in a similar position in that in these programs working with communities of under 10,000 in population, they often don't have what we would think of as congested traffic. We do deal also more with just looking at how different transportation modes are intersecting, for instance, making sure that the kids who are walking or biking to school are not having to cross a 4-lane highway that's going through the middle of their town, or if they have to, making sure that the enhancements, trees and other plantings, and lane changes that may be suggested help with the safety issues in that regard.
Okay, great. Well, we are at the top of the hour, so I think we can probably call it at that. I'm going to put up on the screen survey if everyone can, oops, if it flashes around, there it goes. If everyone can go out there and fill out, I think there are 4 questions. These really help us to improve our sessions and build upon these. So I really appreciate if you could take a minute. Otherwise, I really want to thank Pam and Dorothy for presenting at this, and want to thank our sponsors, the Home Depot Foundation and the USDA Forest Service. Again, I want to remind you also, if you want ISA or SAF credit, please email me after the session. And next session is on special event fundraising. It's on August 21st with Kelly Skumatz from Tree People and Ryan Teller from Friends of the Urban Forest. So I hope everyone can join for that as well. So thanks again to Pam and Dorothy and our sponsors, Home Depot Foundation and the Forest Service, and everyone who attended. Thanks.